It's time to take an inside look at those that are taking their lives, their businesses, and their passions to the next level. Get ready to thrive loud with Lou Diamond.
All right, welcome everyone to another episode of Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond, where we connect you to the most inspiring and amazing people that are thriving each and every day. I'm your host, Lou Diamond, and today I'm joined by one of my favorite people on this planet, Billee Howard.
Hi, Lou.
Hi, how are you, Billee? Let me share. I'm doing great. I'm sorry I'm chopping you off. I'm all excited. I had a lot of coffee today, but we'll just go with that. And hopefully my personality will slow down and our conversation will be fun. I want to share with everyone a little bit about Billee Howard. So to tell everyone who she is, Billee Howard is the founder and chief engagement officer of Brandthropologie, a cutting-edge consultancy specializing in harnessing creativity to solve business problems. Billee is a veteran communication executive in brand development, digital storytelling, trend forecasting, corporate reputation management, content creation and production, strategic media relations, and C-suite executive positioning. Her work has spanned from her early days as press secretary for the president of the Philippines to helping transform dozens of global brands like Samsung, PespiCo, MasterCard, AllState, DreamWorks, and Fast Company. She is the author of WeCommerce, dedicated to the study of the sharing economy. She is an active contributor on Forbes.com and the Huffington Post, and Billee is also an influencer and futurist for IBM. That is an amazing list, by the way, and thank you so much for being on the show today.
Well, I think you should describe me on a go-forward basis because you make me sound great, so thank you for that.
I didn't even have to lie.
Not yet.
Not yet, exactly. Anyway, so before we dig in, what I like to do in every show is share my personal connection to Billee. Where do I begin? I think I've known Billee since I was 12 years old. I'm a little older than she is. And we won't share how old that I am today, but we grew up at the same summer camp, Camp Anawana, one of the most special places in the world. And for anyone that has ever attended camp, the bond that one establishes at camp is a powerful connection that's unbreakable. There are too many memories to list out here. However, recently our career paths have seen some sort of overlap. And even after not seeing one another for quite some time, when we did reconnect, it's as if no time had elapsed at all. I want to add that Billee has been an inspiration to me personally. I often seek her counsel, and I'd even define her as a member of my personal board of directors, where she plays three roles: the role of chief brand officer, the chief marketing officer, and my personal sanity checker whenever I've got a question about doing something. And I quite often need my sanity checked. So that was my little intro of how Billee and I have known each other for quite some time. So this will be a fun conversation, and hopefully I've made her blush just a little bit because she is that great of a person. So let's jump right in, Billee. I've read it, and many others have as well. Tell us about your book, WeCommerce, and the journey of getting there and the message that it conveys.
Well, again, thanks so much for having me. It's really special for me to be on your show since we know each other for so long, and it's nice to see us connect, and I appreciate you reaching out. As far as WeCommerce, it's really been a journey that began right around 2008 when the world fell apart. I happened to have been in Rome the day that the markets collapsed and Lehman failed, and I was at a personal period of, transformation and my professional period of transformation kind of collided at that point when, I realized that I didn't think the world would ever be quite the same after that particular moment, almost as if a global reset button had been pushed. And I think we've seen that happen over the last nearly a decade now. And what happened at that moment was this massive shift from the me to the we. There was a massive distrust in big business and big government, and it was at that time and as a result of those cataclysmic events that we all started to really look to trust one another and to, build this peer-to-peer environment that has led us to the sharing economy, to things like Uber and Airbnb, but more importantly, this fundamental collaborative approach to business that we're seeing now. And WeCommerce is kind of the quilt that connects all of these disparate dots together into a movement which I think has really forever transformed how we work, live, and play. So that's kind of what WeCommerce is about. And it's really the touchstone for how I focus on everything from, my personal aspirations, my personal brand, but also in my work with clients across discipline and executive level in many brands today.
And it's very powerful. I'll even add to this, and this is something you didn't know this. This actually happened yesterday. I have a client who's in Manhattan. I'm walking to their office, and we're working with their whole organization to not only think about how people are thinking of the we from a business perspective. Your message is actually being communicated internally in the organization, and the CEO of this company takes this book off the shelf, and it's your book, and he's like, WeCommerce. He goes, the way this person has written about the way we're thinking about our markets is the way we need to think about how our clients interact. And I literally started laughing. I go, that's powerful for two reasons. One, I totally agree with you, and two, I'm speaking to Billee tomorrow. We're going to do a podcast show. So
wow, I just got the chills. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So your message is powerful and timely and right on with what is going on right now. I wanted to ask you, from as you promoted the book and getting the message out, what has been the response specifically with your clients and a lot of your speaking engagements and places you've been? Obviously, there's an acceptance of it. Has there been any friction where people are having trouble moving from the me to the we?
I think it's a great question because I don't think people are necessarily having a problem, from a mental standpoint, moving from me to we. I think what's happening is there are so many different changes that are taking place right now that people are extraordinarily overwhelmed and they're having difficulty figuring out how to respond. Whether it's the need to, as you just mentioned with this particular client, the need to build internal cultures that are collaborative, that are focused on providing a grander sense of value to the world beyond the bottom line to create what's called a living brand. Cultures are becoming one of the most vital assets that a brand can possess, as human capital is probably one of the most powerful forms of capital in the world today. So you have people struggling with that. You have people struggling with this notion that everybody needs to, if you're a top leader in business, to find their sense of purpose. How do leaders step in to figure out again how to make the world a better place and do so in a way that also obviously benefits their bottom line and their shareholders? How do you embrace creativity? How do you embrace this new global marketplace? How do you understand? How do you fit all of these different pieces together? So I've had a general appreciation for my ideas. I don't think I've had any pushback on if what I'm saying is correct. But some of the challenges that I've faced is the fact that, this book, even though I wrote it 3 years ago, is a bit ahead of the curve. It's a good problem that I've had throughout my career is that sometimes when you're ahead of the market, it takes the market some time to catch up. But I think that people are slowly understanding, how to use my book and to use, some of the strategies that I work with my clients on a daily basis, how to get their arms around this big idea in a more surgical fashion so that they can take biteable pieces and put them into action.
You've always been ahead of the curve, Billee. Let's make that clear. You're a step ahead of everybody. Faster, mine works quicker. This is, eventually everyone is finally getting on the page that they need to be. It's just, it's innovators like yourself, and you just got to accept it.
Well, I learned from you, Lou.
Of course. So you mentioned something in there, and it's something you and I have talked about the collaboration, purpose, and inclusion. And obviously, with a lot of things going on in our country and the world today, it's such an important component of business today. So tell me some of the things that you're experiencing around this and some of the things that you feel that you can even influence from a collaboration, purpose, and inclusion point of view.
Well, I think that, the way that people can understand how to take all of these big ideas and turn them into action is to think about this new age of leadership that we're in. We're in an era of what I think is really collaborative leadership and purposeful leadership. And when you look at the big ideas that way, and you look at them as being responsive to what's going on in our environment, you have an easier time of understanding how to take these big ideas and make them scalable for yourself and for your organization. And I think that these ideas really need to start at the top and funnel from the top down, and then hopefully from the bottom up. I think that one of the biggest shifts that we're seeing, and that I'm speaking about with my clients, that's getting a really good response, is understanding that purpose and inclusion need to go from being activities to being parts of strategy and fundamental business execution on a day-to-day basis. We saw this happen with creativity over the last 5 to 7 years, where creativity moved from being a function of optics to really becoming one of the critical drivers and currencies of business. And I think we're seeing that same paradigm shift unfold in the areas of purpose and inclusion. So I think that as people continue to evolve their businesses and understand how to be responsive to the current landscape and have their businesses have an ear to culture, which I think is one of the most important things that sometimes people miss. How do you mash up commerce with culture in ways that drive meaningful engagement? I think that as people start to fold purpose and inclusion into their day-to-day business strategy, we're going to see a period of business transformation that we haven't seen ever before. And when you look at how technology, which is ultimately the great equalizer, will step in and advance that at an accelerated pace, I think that the next 10 to 20 years will bring us a period of change that we probably haven't felt or seen since the Industrial Revolution.
Wow. I was going to ask you, because I've been dying to actually have this conversation with you. Recently, the activities that took place with United Airlines in early April.
Wow.
And they basically, not only from the actions that took place from the employees on the plane, the comments that came initially from the chief executive officer, there was just this general disconnect from the customers, who, by the way, could be every single person who would ever fly on this planet, to the actual company. And I felt there was that tremendous disconnect, and there wasn't really a connecting culture within the organization. All right, so someone like you, and we joked about this, that there supposedly was an inquiry out there for people in the PR space to say, hey, would anyone be interested in taking on this new large client who has a big challenge out there? Let's play a little devil's advocate. When you have a company that faces some kind of challenge like this, and they're recognizing that from a different perspective of inclusion, they really were actually being very selfish in the way they were thinking. I wanted to bounce an idea off you as a thought leader, as how they're tackling this problem, ideas, and I know there's no easy answer, but I would just want to know how you thought about it when it actually hit the news, and your comments on that.
Well, I think the number one mistake that they made was that they were reactionary and they didn't take the time to pause and have a thoughtful response. I'm not saying that there is any way, shape, or form that they could have gotten around the horrific behavior that their employees exhibited, but to just immediately react as opposed to thoughtfully respond is mistake number one. That's fundamental crisis PR 101 that's been around, since Burson Marsteller invented the model 50 or 60 years ago. So that's mistake number one. To look at how you could fundamentally fix what's going on at United, again, it needs to be something that's from the inside out, from the top down, from the bottom up. It's not something that can be fixed with some type of an episodic campaign or something that's designed to, mitigate against this one particular incident. I think that what's wrong with many industries today, particularly the airlines, is that they are lacking a fundamental sense of empathy, which makes it impossible for them to connect with the consumer in any meaningful way. And that's extremely unfortunate, because experiences are what is going to make competitive advantage stick. When you look at by price point what product or service offerings are, they're by and large extremely similar. They're extremely commoditized. So the only way that you can make a difference of someone choosing option A over option B in the same price point is by making a winning experience that takes into account an emotional connection with a consumer, as well as one that's about, whatever product or service you're offering. And at the core of that type of an experience is, yes, creativity, yes, it's technology, yes, it's all of these different things that can be taken out of a toolkit. But the connective tissue there needs to be about empathy, and that's what's missing, in my opinion, from the entire airline sector, with the exception of possibly JetBlue, but really what I think is fundamentally wrong with United.
Yeah, no, that's spot on, and I think you've just hit the nail on the head with that. I wanted to talk to you about and ask you about storytelling. I love telling stories when I get up and speak, or I work giving examples and helping to coach top leaders and salespeople to improve. And you have an interesting take on storytelling from a different angle, from thinking about from the brand perspective or from a business's competency. Share with us your thoughts on storytelling and its importance in the workplace today.
Sure. I think that, just like we were talking about earlier in the conversation, purpose and inclusion needing to move from activities to fundamental components of business strategy, I think the same thing can be said in an experience-driven economy about storytelling. So historically, storytelling, marketing, communications, you found it at the very end of the supply chain. So all of the cool stuff happened, the innovation, the disruption, the creation, all of that happened, and then it was pushed down to marketing and communications, and you were told, let's create a story about it and transactionally push this information out. In my opinion today, for brands to move from transacting to meaningfully interacting, you need to move storytelling to the very, very beginning of the supply chain and place it at the inception of the invention process. And, in order to do that effectively, you need to understand what makes a great story work. And today, what makes a great story work is very much less focused about the what and more focused about the why. Simon Sinek says this a lot, and I agree with him, but I'm also very focused on the who. And I think that giving people a brand experience to believe in and something that they can feel is aspirational, that they can be a part of, that's something that is fundamentally altering the overall brand valuation of a company. And I think if you look at this new phenomenon of story stocks, I'm not necessarily saying that I believe in story stocks and that investors should purchase stocks based off of the stories told. But I do think if you look at a brand like Tesla, or if you look at a brand like Snap, you understand how they are moving the needle and building fundamental interest and excitement about their brands, less from talking about cars, or, Snap is now positioning itself as a camera company. They're not talking about cars and cameras. They're talking about altering the way that we move and using cameras to fundamentally change how we communicate as human beings and share emotion. So I think that if you look at those ideas as illustrative of how storytelling can be part of a business strategy as opposed to just a vehicle of communication, you can understand this important shift that's taking place and perhaps begin to get an idea of how to put some of that to work for you and your brand.
Billee, is there a brand story that you particularly like today that you're hearing or seeing? And is there one that isn't being told well that you think could use a little bit of a change or an adjustment? I know I'm hitting you on the spot there, but I was just curious to hear if there's something specific that's sticking out in your mind.
Well, I think brands like Tom Shoes and Warby Parker and even Salesforce, those are very disparate brands, but they're doing one thing and they're doing that one thing very well. And that's putting a sense of purpose at the heart of their culture. And they're telling meaningful stories about what they're doing to make a difference in the world each and every day. And they have core storytelling as a part of their business. Warby Parker is not just about making cool eyeglasses. They have amazing experiences that they provide for their consumers around the world. But their whole business model is about giving a pair of glasses to someone in need, every time a pair of glasses is purchased. And that's less about enabling them to see and more about giving them the opportunity that perhaps they never had before to learn to read, to learn to go to school, to learn to have some type of a future. The same thing with Tom Shoes. So I think those are the brands that are doing it very well. I think the brands that are not doing it well, those are more those are more easily to be seen. I think you see that with united. You see that with some of the older, for example, hotel chains who have not adapted to the environment and they're having their lunch fed to them on a daily basis. I mean, you see that in almost every single industry where storytelling and aspiration are not a part of the brand. People are falling back. I mean, you look at somebody like IBM, and I'm not just saying this because I work with them, but they're looking at how to use AI to not just transform technology. They're looking to AI to figure out how to transform the world. And I think if you look at many other technology players in the space, I don't think you'll see that sense of aspiration. So I don't know. Hopefully that gives you a sense of answer of your question.
No, that was perfect. And a good segue too. I was going to ask you about specifically about IBM because one, they've done a great job with Watson and AI and helping to understand that. And I know recently you were a featured speaker at their conference. This is about a few months ago, and I wanted to know specifically if there was something that you took away that you were even more impressed with on the way they've been positioning AI, Watson, and the IBM brand.
Well, I think what I just said was, the biggest takeaway. At first I understood that, I'm a trend forecaster and I have a great following and I'm a marketer. So I understood why IBM wanted me to attend their conference and talk to many people about how do you executive produce your brand, which is one of the hallmarks of my brand. However, I didn't realize the far-reaching purposeful implications that AI and IBM were putting forth into the world, whether it's working with H&R Block to reimagine how taxes are done forever, to, working with an organization like Girls Who Code to make sure that more and more girls get into the technology business. But what I took away most as a marketer is this idea that artificial intelligence can and will ultimately transform how marketing is done and bring the prism of marketing much, much closer to the prism of technology inside of leading organizations. So this idea of creativity and technology coming together to reimagine how experiences are created for consumers. I think that, many people have one or two pieces of the equation potentially in place, but this idea that IBM has and a vision of uniting the CIO and CTO as a partner to work hand in glove with the CMO, I think that that's a very, very compelling tool that will probably forever alter the way that marketing is done, influenced largely by artificial intelligence. So that's taking something that you think of as a robot answering questions on Jeopardy to really putting it to work on a day-to-day basis in ways that I think will make a tremendous, tangible difference.
It's really fascinating. I asked my son, who's going to be 17 years old pretty soon, and I asked him, when I say the word IBM, what do you think of? And his first word was Watson.
Wow.
And AI. And literally, I know that when the first time I think of IBM, I would say words like Big Blue. I think of, that ad campaign with Charlie Chaplin back in the 80s and the first PC desktops. And talk about a transformation over the years of how they've managed to truly transform their story to adapting to the world. And it's impressive. Considering that it's not easy to get big ships like that to change. I mean, they're mostly known as a consultancy more so than a hardware company today. And it's impressive. Actually, it's one of those things that I always sit back and look at bigger companies and how they continue to figure out how to survive. And it could be a roadmap for people to look at something that they have done. And a lot of that is adapting to how you can take a great brand and adapt that story.
Mm-hmm. And having the courage to tear down what doesn't work and, and rebuild again from anew. I think that the brands that are succeeding today have an appetite for creative destruction that others don't. And I think in this type of marketplace, you can't put Band-Aids on top of things that don't work. You have to have the courage to rip them apart and start all over again for you to actually be able to make a fundamental difference. And I think that IBM is a great example of someone who's doing that right. And, I'm excited to see what's to come for them in the future.
Definitely. So let's shift a little bit to you, Billee. I've always wanted to know, you've had lots of successful points. I remembered when I was reading your bio and I was going, oh man, she's done all these different things and has had many different stops and changes along the way. And I want to know if there was one specific pivot or turning point in your career that really enabled you to get to specifically where you are today? If there was one particular moment or watershed day that hit you in your career?
Yeah, there definitely was. It was the day that I left Weber Shandwick in a bit of an acrimonious fashion after having worked there for 13 years. So, I was made an EVP at Weber Shandwick at 29. I was given a global practice to run. It made my career. I invented a type of storytelling for businesses and CEOs that was never done before. I traveled around the world, and I built up a team of 50 people around the globe that were focused just on business storytelling. And it was certainly very exciting, and I'll always be grateful for my time there. But we reached an inflection point where I saw that the marketplace was changing. I said 8 years ago that brands would emerge as tomorrow's studios, which is when I left Weber. And, again, it goes back to one of the first parts of our conversation. Sometimes it's a blessing and a curse to be ahead of the game, because when you're ahead of the game, you see things before other people, but it can be extraordinarily frustrating and even at times painful to not have everybody catch up to you. And it leaves you almost in a almost like being in the middle of a tennis court, and you're in no man's land, and it's a very difficult spot to be. So, having been the best, or one of the best, if not the best, at what I was doing at a given moment, to know that I had to basically leave the traditional PR industry and figure out what I wanted to do next and start all over from scratch. I think I'm a pretty good example of creative destruction, because that was extraordinarily difficult, extraordinarily painful, but I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't do that.
No, and I think we're all thankful that you did, and there's a lot of other companies that are thankful as well for all the people that have worked with you, and also are getting your message today. So kudos to you on that. So as someone who always thrives, and I look up to, as I mentioned earlier, when you're having trouble thriving, who do you seek out to help you get back on track?
Besides you?
Aside from me, I mean, that's an easy answer. But who's the person that you go to? Who's your go-to? I like to say, who's your sensei that you need to seek when you want to get back on the right pulse and beat that you're up to?
Well, interestingly, I have a group of people. I don't just have one person that I go to. I lost my mother at a very young age, and fortunately, I think as a result, I've created very unique and meaningful connections with different women in my life who are, in totally different walks of life than me, different age brackets that, are there for me and can give me a sense of security and safety to be able to just express how I feel and help me to make sense of what I'm feeling and give me, the best path forward. One of those women is one of the top people in finance in the country, and she's significantly older than me. She's more of a mother figure. Another mentor of mine is actually younger than I am and can give me a perspective, that kind of gives me a totally different point of view from someone who's younger and potentially has a different set of circumstances and experiences that can help me respond to the marketplace in a different way. Those are two very professional focused relationships. And then, I also have a personal relationship with somebody that that has been one of my closest friends for over 30 years, and she's a sense of a touchstone that, regardless of what the issue is, I can go to her and have an unvarnished sense of what's going on, who I am, remember who I am, and then chart the best path forward. So, I don't necessarily look at one person. I look at this group of people that I've created to kind of, I guess, fill a void that I have, but it's turned out to be turning something that was, I guess, a negative into something that's extraordinarily positive for me.
And you've established a trust network that's spectacular. And without mentioning that person, every time I think of her, she always makes me smile. And I think that's also a big gift that can literally, that's sometimes all it takes is a simple smile to get us back on track when we're having an off day or we want to improve. But thank you for sharing that with us, Billee. That was awesome. What's one takeaway you want our listeners to remember about what's going on with you now, or something that a message that you feel you'd like to share with our lovely Thrive Loud listening audience?
Well, I think that, what the connective tissue probably is for your audiences is that everybody is somewhat of an overachiever or aspires to be one. And what I would say is that this is probably one of the greatest times in history to be an entrepreneur, to imagine something and go share it with the rest of the world and live your dreams. It's easier said than done, of course, but I think having the courage to be able to push yourself to a point of discomfort is the only way that you're ever going to get through to the other side and come out, better, faster, stronger version of yourself. And I think that what separates the winners from the losers is this ability or appetite to be uncomfortable, to be able to reimagine what comfort looks like, even though those who are really successful are never truly comfortable because they're always striving for what's next. So if I could leave your audience with something, it would be to take advantage of this amazing transformative period in history and use it to your advantage to live your dreams.
Oh, that's awesome. And right in line with what I believe in, live and breathe every single day. So that's great. What's the next big thing for Billee? What's up for Brandthropologie or for you, or something that's on the radar that we should all be on the lookout for?
Well, we're working right now to kind of figure out how do we make purposeful and meaningful and inclusive storytelling a centerpiece of some of the world's leading brands. So hopefully you'll see some projects of ours coming out in that area in the weeks and months ahead. I really do think that this is a time where brands will ultimately have the opportunity to step up and take on a lot more responsibility in society, bridging the gap between the public and private sectors to kind of pick up a bit of the ball that the government has dropped. And we really enjoy working with our clients to do things that not only have a positive impact for them, but have a positive impact for society overall. And that's really what I'm most excited to be focusing on in the weeks and months ahead.
Awesome. How can everybody find you? Twitter, Facebook, what are the key things that we should be on the lookout for Billee? Places to find you.
Well, I'm always on Twitter, which is @mashuptweet. I'm very active on LinkedIn as well. And you can certainly find out all about me and my team at Brandthropologie, which is ie.com. And you can always reach me at billy@brandthropologie.com as well.
Billee, I can't thank you enough for being on the show. More notably, I can't thank you enough for sharing with the entire audience all the embarrassing things you do know about me. So holding back was...
I held back.
I was holding my breath for most of the interview, so I'm very glad for that. Thanks again for being here. It really meant a lot.
Well, thank you.
And thank you for joining us. And until next week, keep thriving onward and upward. And remember, be brief, be bright, be gone.
You've been listening to Thrive Loud with your host, Lou Diamond. Make sure to subscribe on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts, and follow us on Twitter and Facebook @Thrive Loud, or find us on the web at thrivepartners.net.